This video is brought to you by Squarespace. More on them later. Alright, it's finally here, the spectacle event of the holiday season, Kraven the Hunter. Okay, honestly though, after Madam Web, I was really hoping this was gonna channel at least some of that energy. That maybe we'd get some genuinely entertaining, goofy combination of like when Venom's firing at its best and when Madam Web was firing at its best, and by best I mean worst. And while it could never reach the heights of Madam Web,
I know Taekwondo.
this was at least a significantly better watch than both Morbius and the most recent Venom movie. Like, we're never gonna get to the heights of Dakota Johnson trying to climb the side of a wall, but there are some like very cool action pieces in this, some really brutal and fun kills and traps, a little bit like The Crow. Definitely doesn't descend to the lows of The Crow, which is honestly a little bit disappointing in other ways, but you know, this doesn't really have anything to offer as a movie. Well, it does have Russell Crowe committing to a Russian accent and Fred Hechinger, who is the kid I saw eating someone else's popcorn off the floor at a film festival, who honestly has an insanely good agent this year, check out Thelma, and Christopher Abbott, who's usually my film festival darling, being a quirky little weirdo, which I always love and appreciate. Check out my Sanctuary video. And every single one of those was a surprise to me. Like, I hadn't paid attention to anything about this movie other than it starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, and this was so many treats, but not as much as a treat as today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform for creators and entrepreneurs to stand out online. So whether you're looking to sell a service, market yourself, or build a portfolio, Squarespace makes it easy to design the perfect website with their design intelligence to help you stand out and create a unique online identity. In addition to cutting-edge technology combined with industry-leading design expertise, Squarespace offers a variety of services to run your brand or business all in one place. They offer print-on-demand services, the ability to accept and manage payments all in one place, including subscription fees. Combine all that with SEO tools to get you discovered by more people more frequently, you'll be well on your way. As mentioned, I've used Squarespace for ages. Back in the day, I used it for my portfolio when I worked in esports, and now I get to use it as a shrine to my online idiocy. I may be in a near constant state of panic, but not with Squarespace. They made it easy to connect all my social media accounts with a few simple clicks, feature my favorite videos, festival coverage, and more. So check out Squarespace today at squarespace.com/AmandaTheJedi to start a 14-day free trial and get 10% off your first purchase. Now, sadly, a large portion of this movie and its conclusion existed to set up for a sequel we now know is never going to happen, because before this movie even had time to release, it was announced that the Sony spiderverse was ending. For now, at least, they're gonna focus on spiderverse stuff in the 4th MCU movie, but they have to keep churning Spidey stuff out or they lose it. So I thought I'd make sure my Spider-Man was prominently on display with my Gwen Stacy Christmas sweater. But the Spider-Verse where Spider-Man was never allowed to be. Well, mostly, I guess Madam Web did give us baby Peter Parker. And allowed is probably the wrong word. I'm sure it was a combination of realizing how angry audiences would probably be after the backlash that happened when it looked like they weren't renewing the rights with the MCU, and wanting to be able to continue cosplaying as being part of that extended universe. But yeah, this whole thing just ended up being so pointless. Sony lets Marvel use Spider-Man for their movies and then spends 6 years desperately trying to be good enough to force its inclusion in the franchise, while Marvel just kind of said, nah, you just get that like in association with title. We don't want your mess in our cinematic universe, which is now also a mess. And honestly, if I have to pick which kind of mess I'd prefer, I'll actually take the wholesome confusion mess that is the Sony Spider-Verse over whatever the hell Marvel's trying to piece together right now, but maybe they'll get back on track. Now, other than Madam Web, which I did have a genuinely great time with, and some of the Venom highlights, these have all been like pretty mid to terrible movies. Again, Venom kind of had something going with the whole like rom-com between Eddie and Venom once they got that down, but then the third movie was just this massive pointless stinker. I've never experienced a part 3 that felt so much like a part 1 in my life that also existed just to set up some massively stupid villain we're never going to see, which I'm okay with because Null looked boring as shit. I feel like that movie really failed because they originally wanted it to piggyback off of No Way Home and had him bop into a different universe, and then having Venom immediately obsessed with Peter Parker, but then having like zero impact on anything. Like, the third movie starts with that, but then he just immediately gets bopped back into the right multiverse. I don't know if it was a timeline changing or Marvel just being like, yeah, absolutely not, you can't do it, but it was just literally pointless bait slop. God, I'm so sorry, that third movie was just so bland, it pisses me off. But we're here for Kraven, which honestly seemed to be kicking off its own little universe with all these different character inclusions. But much like Morbius and Venom, Kraven is from Spider-Man's gallery of villains that Sony's been clutching to in an attempt to get anything going outside those Spider-Verse movies, which are the gold standard. I guess at one point Marvel wanted to use Kraven as an actual villain for one of their movies, but Sony was like, no, we want him for a standalone movie where we won't and can't use Spider-Man, his main prey. And there lies the issue with so many of the Sony movies that want to make these standalone villain stories. Unless they can find a way to take a character and make it work the same way DC did with the Joker movie or the recent Penguin show and actually do something solid with them as villains without Spider-Man present, They kind of end up having to make the bad guy the good guy, or at least some kind of anti-hero. They don't do it in the way that DC manages to pull off. And I'm not going to give DC too much credit because they have squandered their main line for the most part, really hoping that Superman Legacy turns that around. But there's no denying that the Penguin show does a fantastic job making this anti-hero who is still very much a villain, who's still very much disgusting and very much like genuinely evil. But you have these moments where it's like you kind of come around on him, and then it always reminds you of the other side. They just don't manage to do that with any of these. Venom gets the goofy self-preservation occasionally turned hero because there's always someone worse around to be the baddie. Morbius, the tortured accidental vampire trying to kill his blood illness, who also becomes an unintentional good guy by trying to take out a bigger threat. And now finally Kraven, who is literally the polar opposite of everything his character is supposed to be, which I'm fine with for this movie. Honestly, it doesn't make sense to call it Kraven. It doesn't make sense to use Kraven, but I do find the character pretty interesting. Like with no Spider-Man, there's not a damn interesting thing to do with that central Kraven character, unless maybe he was hunting down Morbius. That would actually have been really cool. Or Venom. Oh, that could have been really fun. They could have just had like these goofy little like villain versus villain stories. That could have been really fun. But originally, Kraven is a ruthless big game hunter who becomes obsessed with making Spider-Man his like grand trophy. And because they can't do that here, they completely flip him around. Now he hunts big game hunters, which honestly I think is pretty cool. Like poacher killing kind of rocks, and then he also kills other big bad people, which is less interesting to me. And other than the flip on his character, they will find a way to link just about any remotely connected Kraven character in some way, which I will touch on. Like obviously there's a lot that won't be, but if it was kind of like a character that you think about associated with Kraven, they're probably featured in this movie in some way, even if it's just in passing on a newspaper. One thing I did notice though is that there are like entire moments from the trailer that seem to be missing from this movie. I think some of that might have been from like end credit scenes that they ended up cutting entirely from the movie once they realized that nothing else was going to happen. But like this scene of him with the vest and the flame, not in the movie. There's also definitely some very weird ADR'd lines that happened in the reshoots, like not as egregious as Madame Web's villain entirely being ADR'd in post, but there are some lines clearly being massively changed because they couldn't get everyone back for those reshoots, and some awkward cuts during dialogue. Like Christopher Abbott says, "Relax" at one point, and you're positive he's going to keep saying something, but then the scene instantly cuts. So I'm like, what did he say after that was no longer relevant to the story? And maybe that's not the case, but I just kind of got the impression that they started dancing around certain cuts because they knew they couldn't go any further with certain storylines, but then they do end up having teasers for what future storylines would have been that we know are never coming. So I don't know. It could actually not, it could just be bad storytelling. But after all that intro rambling and just kind of establishing the state of the Sony Spider-Verse, which is nothing now, let's dive into this movie, which means spoilers. We set the stage with our vigilante busting into a maximum security Russian prison so he can kill a gang leader guilty of, well, we don't know yet. I just assume he's done something really bad. It's pretty funny though, like he gets a personal invite right up to the dude he needs to kill because he could bench press 2 of his henchmen. We learn that Kraven here, or Sergei Kravenov, is the hunter, something of myth known to ruthlessly hunt down crime lords. And for all the faults this movie has, I really do appreciate how they choreographed his fight style. It's very quick, very cat-like, very brutal. Punches feel like they have weight to them, even if they cut away from things quicker than they should, even though they got that R rating. Like, the guy's supposed to be animalistic, and I think they succeeded at making him look animalistic. There's some really cool kills in this movie. Before he escapes out the rooftop, and we see that he's essentially invulnerable to falls, the cold, has super speed, can like land on his feet like cats can, and as he runs into that oncoming storm, where it then also shows him vibing with one of these super dangerous wolves they've warned him about. Like, I feel like they really had to make sure they gave us the full gist of his abilities all in one scene before they will obviously be showing us him learning that all over again when we go through his origin, because yes, they will then again go through his origin, because just like that we cut back 16 years, and honestly this is like a 30-minute scene that just does not feel like it needs to be as long as it is. I'm not even going to talk about the intro where they get pulled out of school, but I'm just going to pick up with Calypso, a young girl getting tarot cards and a magic potion from her grandmother that can apparently bring people back from the brink of death in an unusual way. Look, she pulled the strength card with the lion! But Calypso is another Marvel supervillain turned goodie for the sake of this story. Like, I cannot stress how opposite her character is. Like, in the comic book, she's a voodoo priestess, super aggressive and kind of unhinged, and they throw a bit of a nod to this by having her pull the high priest priestess card. And of course, that mysticism seems to run in her family with her grandmother here, but still just very different character entirely, just the same name, basically. But also in Africa at this time is the Kravenov family. We have Sergei, who will become Kraven, and his half-brother Dmitri. Them being brothers in the comics isn't revealed until quite some time later, but I do like that they took this opportunity to switch it up and have them be raised together. I think that does make for some interesting interesting conflicts down the line. Conflicts we'll never really get to see. But their father is a Russian billionaire drug lord played by Russell Crowe, just once again having a blast with his accent work. And this is a cruel man, super concerned with them turning out weak like their mother who just ended her life, which is fucking harsh. He had locked her away in an institution. And his way to try to toughen them up is to bring them big game hunting while he tries to take down this legendary lion named Tsar, which definitely felt like a nod to Khazar from the comics. His whole idea being that if you kill what can't be killed, you become a legend. Sadly, this doesn't work out so great because the lion stalks the boys first, but then he and Sergei make this intense eye contact and it seems like he's about to go away, but then the dad shoots it so it attacks Sergei. Okay, I'm sorry. The trailer makes it seem pretty brutal, and it is brutal, but it just felt so wild and out of place as it was happening in the movie. And maybe I'm just a sicko, but I absolutely started laughing with some of the visual choices and how abrupt it all was. You literally just watch his limp body being drug off into the brush, and then his hand is just running through the wheat like in Gladiator. I almost thought that the movie was going to do a bait and switch on another layer and have Dmitri be Kraven now, but no. The lion ends up taking his body right to Calypso and actually seemed to present it to her as if that was his intention all along. Yeah, I mauled the hell out of this dude, but here you go. Here's that destiny your grandmother warned you about. Get to it. And just as it turns to leave, a drop of the lion's blood enters an open wound on Sergei as Calypso gives him the potion and he sparks back to life in the hospital, forever changed. I gotta say though, it feels pretty fucked up that your family seems to have these ancient mystical powers and you don't even get to be the immediate beneficiary of it. That feels messed up. But after getting home and realizing that his dad isn't gonna let him go back to school because he thinks he's being a sissy, Sergei runs away to avoid becoming the same kind of monster as him, where they, yes, immediately show us his power sets all over again. Just in case you forgot. Honestly, a lot of these power demonstrations reminded me of Twilight, he's climbing the tree like a less graceful Edward without a spider monkey to hold on tight. Though there was one ability that they couldn't figure out how to show until later, and it doesn't even actually have anything to do with the plot. It's his enhanced smell. So they have him compliment this woman's perfume, and then she's like, oh thanks, I'm not wearing perfume. And then her boyfriend's like, shut up, man, because it's the smell of the perfume of the woman he's cheating with, which I thought was very silly and fun. That actually got an audible, oh shit, from behind me in the theater. Anyways, as mentioned, instead of him being a poacher, he kills the poachers, which again, I love. And then it cuts to the present where he's still killing poachers. He literally bites off one of their noses, which I just love that commitment. I do feel like they spent entirely too much time on that flashback though. It all felt so terribly disconnected from the opening scene and then really disconnected from what was happening immediately after that opening scene. It was just a very weird choice and they spent so much time on it. But here he is now as Kraven the Hunter with a list of people he kills, and once you're on the list, you never get off. And it really is just this massive physical book that he brings around for dramatic effect while killing people. And you know what? I'll allow it, because what are we here for if not theatrics? But what's the plot in this thing other than him just hunting down poachers and other baddies, you might ask? Well, if someone is running around viciously murdering crime lords, you might want to deal with that if you're a crime lord. I actually think the more interesting story point here would have been a brutal internal battle over your own father being one of the biggest bads there is out there, and having to go toe to toe with him in the ways you guys are similar and how you're fighting being him, but this is supposed to be a villain, so they probably just didn't want to go that route. You do get a little bit of that in this movie, but it's really just not that emotionally satisfying, so instead we get the Rhino. And yes, it is that Rhino. They do something a little bit different with him here. He apparently wanted to be invulnerable, so got treatment from Miles Warren, aka the Jackal. And while it does work, it's super painful, so he's constantly infusing himself with counter medications when he's not needed to be the Rhino. So he's just become this unconventional, nerdy little crime boss that forcibly takes over for the gang leader Kraven recently killed. Because there's always another snake ready to pop up when you cut off a head. But that puts the Rhino back in Kraven's father Nikolai's inner circle. All those years ago in the jungle while they were hunting, Papa Kravenov treated Rhino like dirt, and now he wants revenge in the form of taking over his entire operation. and killing him. And he makes that play on his life at the younger brother Dimitri's own club, which leads Nikolai again to drive home how pathetic he finds Dimitri, who's played by Fred Hechinger, who again is the kid I saw dip down at TIFF, grab someone else's abandoned floor popcorn and eat it. Like, it was in a bag, but still. But his agent is on it this year, like he's in The Nickel Boys, which is getting a bunch of Oscar buzz, Thelma, which was charming as hell, and he's the syphilis emperor in Gladiator 2. Though I will say the performance is a little bit weird. They didn't really have accents as kids, and I think he went to school in New York, but he's been living in London, so it's weird that he's suddenly just developed the Russian accent now later in life. But whatever, back with the Rhino. As someone who's just expanded his criminal empire, he receives a warning about the Hunter, along with a video revealing that he's not in fact a myth, but Sergei Kravenov, the son of the man he hates the most. So that's where the drama's headed. Kraven is no longer anonymous thanks to this very high quality Serbian prison video. And it's gonna be a lot easier to catch him now that he's visiting London for his brother's birthday, where Kraven also takes the opportunity to finally track down the person responsible for saving him all those years ago, and somehow with just a tarot card track down Calypso. Earlier on, his dad said he wanted to teach him the joys of stalking, and wow, he took that to heart. But Calypso is now a lawyer, and he wants to team up with her to help track down the people law can't hold accountable. So he's literally saying, help me find people you can't arrest so I can murder them, please. So she's very much different than her comic book counterpart that is just this like sociopathic lady that riles up Kraven to kill Spider-Man, and she's honestly pretty hesitant about his murder methods. But after the awkward birthday festivities with Daddy Dearest, Dimitri ends up kidnapped by Rhino's men. And I love this chase scene. Again, I really feel like they do a good job making him move more like an animal. He's not graceful in his feats of strength. It's a little messy and aggressive, especially in this situation where you can feel it's a very specific desperation to try to get to that car. But I also have to mention the ridiculous moment before he realizes the brother got nabbed, where he's getting standoffish with a douche in an elevator and is like, yeah, I'm a hunter. I hunt people.
What you do for work, exactly?
I hunt people.
And I needed so much more of that. If you just amped that up in this movie, we'd be getting to Madam Web heights. But he doesn't manage to stop the escape helicopter, so he turns to Calypso to help figure out who's responsible after his father refuses to pay the $20 million ransom, even though they've already cut off Dimitri's ring finger. Said it would be weakness to pay the ransom, as if letting your son die isn't also a sign of weakness. You want to protect a drug empire and you can't even protect your own son? But the Rhino's also got some special help on his hands in the form of Christopher Abbott as the Foreigner, a mercenary who's trained himself to put people under rapid hypnotic trances for up to 10 seconds, which makes for some very cool scenes in this movie. I also like that they made him less of a Punisher light and more of this like lithe little weirdo. Like, between Christopher Abbott and Kraven, there is some very fun stuff here. Anyways, they were hoping to nab Kraven in the penthouse, but settled on the brother to lure him out when they couldn't find him. So he figures out who has him, but the first place is a trap, but includes some very fun scenes of him sneaking around right up people's asses. Like, I mean, these people should be able to feel him breathing down their neck. It's the way that I play stealth missions in video games, which is poorly, and he's actually pulling it off. What game mode is that? I need that. When I try this stuff, people start shooting at me. But whatever, he figures out it's a trap when they try to blow him up, but still makes it out easy peasy. Still far too much of the runtime left for that to have been an inconvenience. But because on this mission he used poisoned darts with a plant only available in the area his hideout is, the Foreigner is able to figure out exactly where he is and has this super intense neurotoxin ready to kill him. But before they can put that plan to work, Kraven does pull off a series of fantastic kills with bear traps and by enlisting the help of a local murder kitty. Murder kitties are sick! But he clamps someone's head shut with a bear trap and then uses them to hold people's legs in place while they then get drugged and split apart. Incredible! No notes! Up the ante a little bit and really show me Kraven enjoying those kills, or at least getting somewhat of a villain side to him. But once Foreigner starts popping off with the darts, it's all over, because between the toxin shutting down his body and the Foreigner's hypnosis, the boy stands no chance. But thankfully, Calypso here did archery at summer camp and clocks him right through the eye. Which, badass, but also bummer. I want so much more of the Foreigner because he is so much more interesting than the Rhino. Like, I actually think more of a psychological final battle where he couldn't actually be on even playing fields because of the hypnosis would have been way more interesting than just like a brute strength versus invulnerability thing. But whatever, once again, she needs to save Kraven with her family's secrets so he can finish the mission. Lucky for him, she had more, because she wasn't supposed to have more, and she just leaves him with the, you're not the only one with secrets. We will never learn about those unless they're already the things we found out a little bit in the beginning of the movie. But it's her time with Kraven where you really notice the horrible ADR. Like, I don't think I have an example of it at all, but like there's lines that clearly weren't being said and them doing weird things with like the mouth to try to make it match. Like, I know the strikes made things weird, but still, clearly they stopped caring at some point. But whatever, he's off to confront the Rhino, who does go full Rhino mode here, horns and all, and looking very terrible, who hints that it was Kraven's own father who sent the video that put them on his trail. But that means it's time for the brutal fight, and as the Rhino, which is probably the first time time Kraven's felt significantly shitrocked in a battle because he's invulnerable, but Kraven manages to exploit the hole where his counter medicine connects and lays him out pretty fast. And that's why I really think a big final battle with the Foreigner would have been way more interesting. But yay, that means the brother is saved and now he has to decide how to deal with Daddy Dearest, who admits he always knew his son was Kraven the Hunter. Yeah, I guess if you figure out the guy that's killing everybody goes by Kraven and your last name is Kravinoff, it seems like it might be your absentee wilderness son. And he didn't send the info off to set him up, it's because he knew it would distract Rhino from making another hit on his life and leave Kraven no choice but to kill him. And with that confirmation and the overall lack of care towards the family, Kraven leaves his dad with the same words he got as a kid, never fear death, before sending a bear to maul him to death after stealing all his ammo. Brutal and deserved. I really do think there's so many missed opportunities with the relationship dynamic and being two sides of a coin, but whatever, we cut to a year later. Once again for the brother's birthday, and he's now taken over the Empire instead of shutting it down like he promised to, which Kraven obviously has a problem with. He doesn't want his brother to turn out like his dad, but Dimitri points out that Kraven's the one like their dad. Cruel and brutal, just another man looking for a trophy. Now this whole movie, Dimitri's been doing this incredible job mimicking voices, so I was wondering if they were going to pull the trigger on his alias in this movie, and they do. He went to that same geneticist the Rhino did to have work done, Miles Warren, and now he's the chameleon and can literally change his appearance to anyone he wants. And he's going to use that to get the respect he's always deserved. But again, as cool as that sounds, this isn't going to amount to anything because this is apparently the end of the line. I guess they've said they're just focusing on supporting the 4th MCU Spidey movie and just things involving the Spider-Verse. These movies weren't really connected very much anyways. Like, I think a few of them were. I know Madam Web absolutely was not. I'm sure they'll continue making Spider-Man movies in the future because they have to, or they'll lose the IP. But with the box office on Kraven, it seems pretty clear that we will not be seeing a part 2 here. So the last thing we're left with is Kraven reading a letter from his dad saying they're basically the same person and opening a box to find his iconic lion fur vest his dad had made with the lion that attacked him all those years ago. Yes, that is the only time you will see that in the whole movie. I could have assumed that some of these trailer clips were originally from a post-credits scene that got cut because they felt there was no point teasing a future that wasn't gonna happen, but man, just one scene with this slutty little furry vest? That is kind of a comic book movie favorite fan service. If you're not gonna show the thing that people like the entire movie or a classic costume, you can just like tease it at the end and it's okay. But yeah, that's Kraven. It doesn't really feel like he got any character arc. I feel like the realization that he's essentially his father should have been a major point of the movie, not just something to close it out on. I think this movie, in theory, wanted to make Kraven more of a bad guy because he's this ruthless murderer, but that's a hard sell when he's just killing gang leaders and poachers. He kind of just feels like Aquaman in that regard. They really would have needed to show more of that brutality and specifically him like really enjoying it so that you kind of get the like, oh, okay, he's a sick fuck too. That's okay. And I find the Father Nikolai entirely too infuriating with like too little pushback. Like, it's one thing for him to be a narcissist who doesn't think he's the reason his son hates him, but I need the son to push back there a little more at some point and not just in like one final scene. The effects were, as predicted, pretty shitty looking, especially the Rhino. There's this messy as hell dialogue, especially the ADR choices. Like, at one point, Calypso says she died not long after and I never saw her again, which is just a redundant statement unless that's supposed to include a metaphysical visit from beyond the realm from her grandmother as well that's been not had. But yeah, I was just really hoping this was going to be more on the Madam Web side of things, but a bit more brutal because of the R rating. But sadly, it just couldn't commit to those levels because they thought they were making a good movie. Still better than Morbius, though. But let me know what you guys are thinking down below if you actually saw this movie. I'm assuming it's few of you, and maybe that's why you're here. If you did enjoy it, again, I don't think it's as bad as some people do, but it's certainly pretty dang forgettable. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring the video. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.